We are live. We are live. Welcome once again, college football's peek around the corner with your host, Greg Pflugar. We cover everything in college football because we love everything in college football. And if you do as well, please subscribe to this channel. Smash the like button if you like our content. Share the video with your family and your friends if you want to support this Rebel Outpost YouTube college football channel. With a donation, just hit that $sign when you make a comment and we'll get to you super chat as quick as possible. Welcome in to the studio that sits on the corner of Keith Jackson Parkway and Kurt Gowdy Avenue. Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid, PATC community. Do not be afraid to be a legend in the chat room and with your phone calls later in the show. Suddenly out of nowhere, I've got a stacked show today on a Sunday. I know we did the live show we did yesterday was epic. If you missed it, go watch it. Please go watch it. Today's is completely different. Completely different storylines going on in college football. That's what we're covering today. Yesterday, we also did the Great 8 2024 Top 8 Running Backs. Nobody in the chat room agreed with my rankings. Go check that out. See what you think. I was going to do... I was going to do an episode. No. Then I was going to do an early peak episode for members only. But then I said, no. We're going to have a few of those being dropped this important week. Then my wife, the little general, the moderator, the one who rules with the iron fist, she's cooking a roast today. And I can smell it coming in through the walls into the studio. And I said, Maria, I got to go live. I've got to go live. Now, she knows that this next week coming up is going to be very important. And we could be popping on live a couple times a day. So strap in. I was not expecting to go live today. However, we did find this out not last night. Shame on me. We found out about this early today, this morning. Florida State filed a brief on Friday against the ACC. Again, it goes back to the constitutionality of the ACC's actions. Did they follow their own constitution, their own bylaws when they went and filed their case in Mecklenburg County against Florida State's Board of Trustees, to be technically correct, on December 21st, a day before Florida State went to Leon County after that Board of Trustees meeting where they had to do it public? Again, Florida State is saying that they did not follow their own bylaws, their own constitution. And now I'm going to they're going to be really good, smart people analyzing this brief that was put on Friday. I'm going to show you the brief. I am not a lawyer. I am not, as you all know, I am not very bright. The elevator don't go all the way to the top. The tools in my tool shed are not very sharpened. But there's some things here that I can understand. Even the fat guy from Minnesota can understand. And when we go through it, we're not going to go through this whole briefing. We're not going to do that. But my question at the end of it to you all will be, is there some cloak and dagger going on here? Is there some ACC schools that are playing the game of cloak and dagger against the ACC? I'm just bringing up the question. I'm not, allegedly. I'll put up the quotes. I don't want to get sued by anybody. Is there some cloak and dagger stuff going on? Because if you read the brief, again, I'm not too bright, right? Maybe I got it all wrong. Maybe people in the chat can say, Greg, you've got it all wrong, or give me a phone call later in the show. But Florida State, this is the second time now. The second time they brought this up in a briefing. In fact, before the first time they brought this up in a brief, we did a live show on this. With the Florida State Money Perch told us, we reported to you that Florida State was going to be questioning the legality internally that Jim Phillips had the authority to file this suit on December 21st. Then Florida State put that in a brief motion, whatever you call these things, and they did it again yesterday. But they do it... it almost seems like Florida State has, well, the receipts on this. Like, they know. They know that you didn't have the votes to have even a quorum. You didn't have the participation even enough to fill the quorum. You didn't have the 2/3. You didn't have any of this. And I think they're going to be asking in Mecklenburg County on March 22nd, because this was a brief towards Mecklenburg County, if I'm correct. Again, correct me if I'm wrong when we go through this, because I think a lot of you haven't seen this yet, but maybe some of you have, and of course, you all are a lot smarter than I am, so maybe you could correct me on this. This is a community. We're helping each other out. I've got my connections, but you guys have the brains, so bring it in. Bring it into the studio. Let's figure this out. Get your head on a swivel. Get your brain going. Put something in your Cloak and Dagger mug, and let's get to work. But sitting here in Minnesota, the fat guy from Minnesota, it seems to me, after reading this, is that Florida State knows that the ACC hasn't done what they needed to do to file that lawsuit on December 21st, 2023 in Mecklenburg County, because the other schools have been telling Florida State. That's how I'm reading it. We are going to hit on that briefing. But that's not how we're going to start the show. That's the main story of the show. But there's something else. We have talked about this. We've talked about SMU. And we've talked about how they jumped over the wall. They got to a Power 4 conference. They got into the ACC. And they are coming out ahead. Even though they have to give up 9 years of Tier 1, Tier 2 media revenue money, SMU is still coming out ahead versus if they stayed in the AAC. Now, there is some risk because the ACC may implode. We don't know exactly the value of the ACC. They're going to backfill, probably, maybe SMU. But for right now, SMU has come out ahead. But SMU coming out ahead, all the ingredients that made it so that SMU is coming out ahead, even though they're not going to get Tier 1, 2-tier media revenue money from the ACC for the next 9 years, that is the same ingredients. The same ingredients that makes the ACC being able to hold together, it's a daunting task, because the same ingredients that grease the skids for SMU to go to the ACC is going to make it easier for Florida State, North Carolina, Clemson, Miami of Florida, possibly even Virginia Tech, North Carolina State. It's going to make those skids greased up to where they can leave, possibly leave to the Big Ten, to the SEC, to the Big 12, because their skids are going to be greased the same way that SMU was. And when we show it to you, it becomes quite apparent that if the distribution model that's being socialized this past couple weeks, if that actually goes into effect after next week, SMU came out ahead, but it carries bad news for Jim Phillips in the ACC. We're going to start with that. And then we're going to go on to Florida State. Swats back at the ACC yesterday in a new brief. Holy smokes. Before we get to the big two stories of the day, I want to thank everybody who's come on in at the beginning of a lazy Sunday afternoon, PATC. Everybody's watching the women's college conference championships. Congratulations. But this is a college football channel. It remains a college football channel. James Foster is in the house. Bruce Harris Boomer is in the house. Red Raider Laura Weiss, R. Webb, John Munster. Sunshine Design. Thanks for coming on in. Gopher Guy. All right, Chad Bracey's in the house. Mooncat. Penn State is in the house. Atwood. AMAC. Raider Vision. Red Raider is in the house. Lee. Bill G. R. Webb. Randy Taylor. Jim Reese. Keep your head on a swivel. John Bennett. We are live. Anthony Carlson. Oh, yeah. Nick Boardman is in the house. Jeff Beaver's present. He is present. Dave B. Go BYU. Bearcat Steve. A beautiful Sunday in Central Florida. Nathan Jones. Tony. Toby. Hey, Greg, on a scale from 1 to 10, what number would you give that the college football playoffs fall apart this week? What's 1 and what is 10? If I'm saying that 10 is that's definitely going to fall apart, and 1 is it's definitely not, I'm going to give it a 2.68. 2.68 because it can't fall apart. It cannot fall apart. But maybe I'm the schmuck. Maybe I'm the schmuck in this storyline. Buck is in the house. Fighting Illini. Zach, Mock, Terry Kane, Anthony, Kyle, Bob Swanger, Nathan is in the house. Kirk Bender, Joaquin Morales is here. Donnie is here. Mr. Monkey Says is here. The doctor is in the house. Jen Knoll 2013 is in the house. Holy smokes. We got everybody. To Masta. Basketball. It's on fire. The Hawkeye, Mr. Hawkeye is in the house. Kyle Visser, whose house? Sean, good evening, Greg. Good evening to you, Sean. Gary is here. Mr. Penn State. Charles M. is here. Congo is here. Okay. Let's get to it here. Let's get to it. We've got a lot to get to. First of all, we've got to hit this SMU ACC, the ingredients that got SMU over the wall to get to the ACC, to get to a Power 4 conference, is the same ingredients that's going to help Florida State, North Carolina, Clemson to jump over the wall on into the SEC and the Big Ten. First of all, we're going to start with this. Remember the breaking news, right? When it happened. Cal, Stanford, SMU will come at a significant discount, which will help create a revenue pool to be shared among the ACC members. SMU is expected to come in for 9 years with no broadcast media revenue. Cal, Stanford will each start out receiving just 30% of the share. Okay, so SMU not coming in for any media money for 9 years. So how are they coming out ahead, jumping from the AAC to the ACC? Well, first of all, in another article, it doesn't mean that SMU will get nothing. There are other conference distributions. There's other money out there that is part of your conference payout. That's why media money doesn't equal conference payout. ACC schools, they get about $39 million, 38, I believe, in the last round here of conference payout, but they're making in the high 20s when it comes to Tier 1, Tier 2, and ACC network. The rest of it is your NCAA tourney money, bowl, tie-in money, and your college football playoff money. All that gets into the pot that the ACC distributes and other conferences, and that is your conference payout. So there's other stuff going on, right? SMU still is going to make some NCAA tourney money when they're an ACC member, bowl money, and then playoff money. Okay? The SMU earned about 8 to 9 million annually in total distribution from the American Athletic Conference. They made about $7 million when it comes to their media money, their Tier 1, Tier 2. Okay? But for the sake of discussion, let's just say 8 million. Let's just bump it up. SMU made 8 million because that 8 to 9 is total distribution, not just media money. But let's just give it the figure of $8 million. Okay? In this article, even without the Tier 1 media rights money, the Mustangs will earn at least that same amount annually in the ACC. True when it comes to conference distribution. Not only that, this is the ACC playoff payout. Considering the distribution, this is from Yahoo Sports, we all saw this last week. The SEC teams, if this gets approved next week, this is what's been socialized. That's the new phrase of this month. The SEC teams will earn $23 million annually. The Big Ten, $21. The ACC around $13.7. The group of 5 teams are expected to earn a figure just south of $2 million. But let's just call it $2 million. It's probably more like 1.8 million, but let's just call it 2 million. So your AAC schools are going to be making about 2 million in playoff money and 8 million in media money, although it's a little less than that. Let's just call it 10 million. $10 million going forward for AAC schools when it comes to playoff distribution and their media money. Well, SMU starting in 2026, we got this confirmed here at Peek Around the Corner. They're going to get their full share in 2026. So if this passes, if this gets done, if it's anywhere close to this, the playoff money alone will give SMU around $13 million. Right here it's listed 13.7. I'm just showing you all this because SMU is coming out ahead. Now, they're going to be behind when it comes to way behind the other ACC schools when it comes to conference payouts for the next 9 years. And it's going to hurt them. They're gonna supplant some of that, the gap, with their booster money. It's already happened, by the way. They've already been guaranteed $100 million right out of the chute by some couple of big boosters they have. So, just an illustration that the ingredients that grease the skids for SMU to be able to make this deal. Some of it was boosters, of course, but this new playoff money, the gold rush of 2026, made it even more possible that SMU could make this move. Now remember, when SMU, they thought they were going to be getting ACC playoff money, distribution money, like every other ACC school for 24 and 25. They're not getting the $6 million. It sounds like they're not getting the $1 million like the G5 schools. It sounds like they're getting somewhere in between. But this is all SMU is coming out ahead, not versus the ACC schools, but what would their reality be if they stayed in the AAC? And plus now they've got, now they're in the power conference, and who knows what the future is, but they're at least in their room. They're in the room for now. Now use all of those ingredients. Use all of that logic. Use all of those numbers and look at Florida State. Look at Florida State. You know how we talk about, I talk about it a lot. The media market is tight. It's tight right now. Washington and Oregon only they got a discount. They had to come in as a discount. But and then PAC schools, some fan bases were saying, why would you go to the Big Ten? You're only making a little bit more money in media money because you have to come in at such a discount if you would have stayed at the PAC. Well, here's an example. You're going to be making a whole lot more just in playoff distribution money. Now, it might not be 21 million. It might be 20. It might be, who knows what that number is going to be. Hopefully, we'll all find out by the end of the week. But this is greasing the skids. This is causing more incentive for Florida State, for Clemson to finally pull the trigger, for Miami of Florida to become even more of an interested observer. The $1.3 billion, now this is going to sound brutal, but if this gets passed, if this how it is, by the end of the week, this distribution model, or anywhere close to this distribution model, this is going to grease the skids big time. Because now Florida State has to put this in their risk-benefit analysis, how much they're willing to pay to get out of the ACC. If the Big Ten expands with Florida State and a couple other schools, and the SEC expands and the Big 12 expand, the ACC is going to fall. That money is going to get stripped away and given to the Big 10, SEC, and Big 12. All those numbers are going to go up. The $1.3 billion is going to stay, but the more slice. This is going to sound brutal, but I got to say it. I got to be straight with you. The money's going to be taken out of ACC schools' hands that don't have those landing spots. And it's going to go in the hands of a Florida State, of a Clemson, more of it. This is the gasoline. Forget about greasing the skids, the pallets. This is lighting everything on fire, and Florida State's running out of the building. This is the incentive for them to run out. For them to even say, I don't know, we were told 190 to 210. They were willing to do that, 190 million to 210. But shoot, they're probably willing to do even a little bit more. The media money's tight. What we're talking about, and then you talk about the SEC. In their new media contract, starting in July 1st of this year, there's a pro rata clause in there. It means that any school they add to the SEC, they're going to get paid as much media Tier 1, Tier 2, and SEC network money, Tier 3, Whatever schools they add, they're going to make the same as a Mississippi State, at Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, and Arkansas, Texas, Texas A&M, Oklahoma, you name it. They're going to be getting paid the same. Now, it doesn't mean, in reality, it doesn't mean that the SEC can add any school they want without ESPN saying, go do it. But whatever school they do add, they're getting the whole shebang. And then they're going to get more playoff distribution money. It's not going to even be $23 million each. It could be $25 million each, 26 million. This is gasoline. What made the SMU, you all know this, but I don't think we've really made it this obvious. What made the SMU jump happen? Great news for SMU. They jumped over the wall to get to a Power 4 conference. But that same greasing of the skids for them to be able to do it is the same ingredients. And it's like times 10 for Florida State, for Clemson, for North Carolina. And this is why. Why am I talking about this? Why am I talking? Greg, why are you talking about this right now? We finally understood your Saturday show. But why are you talking about this on Sunday? Because next week, in my estimation, it's not Brett Yormark that I'm keeping my eyes on. It's Jim Phillips. Because remember, Brett Yormark, he's trying to get that clause in there where there's a look in, where any year, if there's realignment that happens before 2028, they get to redo this, right? Big 12 gets to eat more, right? Those numbers, distribution numbers go up, right? So it isn't Brett Yormark, as long as he gets that clause in there. The only one that's going to be putting up a stop sign when it comes to the Power 4 conferences is Jim Phillips. You know, there was this great pushback on the exclusive rights for the buys, right? SEC and the Big Ten, and I absolutely agree with that great pushback. And that's what my show was on Saturday. And I think Sankey's feeling the heat on that because that's absolutely ridiculous. But for Jim Phillips, I think it's this revenue distribution model. I think this is what he's going to fight tooth and nail on. If this actually passes somewhere around close to this, and I think it will. See, that's the thing. This is what I've been talking about since August 2022. This is the 2026 Great Gold Rush. This is what they're going to throw those elbows on. This is why SEC and the Big Ten's been doing all this. This is why they've accumulated their chips. This is why, for voting rights and money, the distribution model for the playoffs, the Great Gold Rush of 2026. This, I think they're going to get this. They're not going to get their 4 automatic qualifiers. They're not going to get that stupid exclusive rights for automatic first round bye, but they're going to get something close to this distribution model, in my opinion, and what I believe, what other people have believed. And when this happens, I don't think it's Brett Yormark that's going to be sweating. I think it's going to be Jim Phillips. The SMU, good news for SMU. They helped grease the skids for proactive expansion that Jim Phillips did. Remember, this was Jim Phillips' work. This is what he wanted to do. They wanted to be proactive because when they lose a Florida State, a Clemson, a North Carolina, they wanted to make sure that they backfilled before it happened with Power 5 schools of Stanford and California and SMU greased everybody's skids by not taking 9 years of Tier 1 and Tier 2 money, knowing that they were going to get a higher piece of the playoff distribution money. All that is coming true, but the problem is Florida State's going to use that math. Clemson's going to use that math. North Carolina's going to use that math. ESPN, Fox Sports, Petiti, Yarmark, and Sankey. They're all going to use that same math. So I again, my eyes are on Jim Phillips when it comes to next week. Now, let me just go to the comments here. We do have a super chat. We're going to get to the Florida State story. I'm very curious on your comments and your phone calls. We're going to open up the phone lines right after we get into the Florida State. They filed another brief in Mecklenburg County yesterday. Coy, thank you so much for your incredible generosity, gifting another membership. Holy smokes. Thank you, sir. You are hereby once again Cloak and Dagger Knighted. Thank you so very much. Thank you, Coy, for your generosity. I do appreciate it. I'm going to see if I can find out who Dennis Hattie. You are gifted a membership. Congratulations. Say thank you to Mr. Coy. You are hereby knighted, Cloak and Dagger. Okay, here we go. Florida State. Let's not waste any more time. Again, I'm not a lawyer. And I've only been able to reach 2 people on this. So people are talking about this brief. Let me pop this up here. Everybody, hold on. Brendan Sanon knows 247. Florida State versus ACC lawsuit. Florida State sharpens focus to swat down ACC's claim for venue in North Carolina. In the battle for the all-important venue claim, Florida State made its most direct points yet to swat away the ACC's attempt to hold court in North Carolina. In the battle, Florida State filed a reply brief on Friday evening, last night, and I did not hear about it until this morning. Ahead of a case management conference coming up on March 22nd in Mecklenburg County that will hear Florida State's request to dismiss or stay the AC's lawsuit against Florida State. Let me see if I can make this bigger so you guys can actually... There you go. You guys can actually read it now. Florida State is arguing that the ACC's guidelines for exiting the conference are excessive to the point of not being enforceable, and that the ACC was involved in self-dealing, while the ACC has maintained that Florida State agreed to the exit penalties. Broadcast partner ESPN has gotten involved as well in the North Carolina complaint to support the ACC's request to seal the documents between the league and the network while concealing valuable trade secrets. And that is when the ESPN basically said, we won't go down that rabbit hole. But let's just say they used the word felony. One of the center arguments, as both parties have dueling lawsuits ongoing, Florida State filed a suit of Florida against the ACC after approval from a Board of Trustees meeting in December 22nd. The day after, which was December 21st, the ACC preemptively filed its suit against Florida State in North Carolina for the right of jurisdiction. With both sides having sued one another in their respective states of businesses, the idea of home field advantage is at play. Now get this. Florida State argues in its latest filing on Friday that the ACC indisputably failed to follow its own constitution prior to initiating this suit. Remember, they did it a day before Florida State did it, claiming that the ACC declared that it won the race to the courthouse. The ACC put that phrase in one of its motions. It could have been the first one, I'm not sure, I don't remember. But they did use that phrase. The ACC won the race to the courthouse, while admitting that it did so only by breaking its own rules and well-established rules governing civil litigation. Attaching corresponding emails between the ACC General Counsel, Pearlin G. Hoke, dated January 12th, the Florida State Chief Legal Officer, Carolyn Egan, dated January 18th, Florida State contends that the ACC committed a fatal flaw due to the ACC's admitted failure to comply with its own constitution. That is the PATC money shot of this whole article, this whole brief, this whole story, this whole live show. Again, and I got a feeling that Florida State has the receipts on this. And I'm very interested to hear what you all have to say in the chat and with the phone calls. Back to the article. By this, Florida State means that it believes the ACC opted to sue Florida State for its attempt to withdraw from the conference before Florida State Board of Trustees filed any suit against the ACC, and it believes that the ACC, here it is, that it believes, Florida State believes the ACC did so without holding a vote among league members in order to get to court first for the right of jurisdiction. And I'm going to ask you, I'm going to ask Jen Knoll, I'm going to ask JD, I'm going to ask Mr. Hawkeye, I'm going to ask everybody in the chat room. Florida State is acting like this is the second time they've gone down this path. I'm not a lawyer. I'm just a fat guy from Minnesota. But Florida State, to me, as a layman, as a person who was 12 credits away from pre-law, barely able to get my college degree at St. Cloud State, Minnesota, because I couldn't get into any other college. Are you kidding me? It seems to me that Florida State has the goods on this. Maybe it's just my North Minneapolis, North Side upbringing. That's how I'm reading this. It seems that Florida State has the goods on this. It seems like they have the goods on this because somebody's given them the goods on this. We'll get back to that in a second. The ACC does not get to replay the down. The ACC does not get to replay the down, Florida State wrote in its filing from Friday. Whoops. From the filing, all of the ACC claims are premised on the filing on the Florida action, and the ACC causes of action could not become live until Florida State Board actually initiated its lawsuit. In other words, the ACC can now assert its claims because the Florida State Board did in fact file suit the next day. In absence of Florida action, the ACC's claims simply all fall away. As such, the ACC's lawsuit is by definition a premature and non-justiciable, whatever that word is, filing premise on conduct by another party that had not yet occurred and confirms that the Florida State Board is the true plaintiff. And all that means is when the ACC acted on December 21st, if Florida State would have not have acted at all, that whole ACC action on 21st would have just failed and crumbled. And according to Florida law, that doesn't fly, and that by such, the ACC's lawsuit by definition is premature. It's not justified. Now, I am not going to go through this whole briefing. There is some parts I want to hit here. The ACC declared that it won the race to the courthouse. But what Florida State is saying that is Jim Phillips did not have the authority, the capability in accordance to the ACC's constitution, bylaws, that they couldn't do this on December 21st. They didn't have the power to do this. And no number of subsequent clandestine meetings. Again, this was a briefing from last night, Friday, March 9th. And no number of subsequent clandestine meetings to which no notice was provided to the Florida State Board and apparently other conference members can undo or salvage this threshold fatal flaw due to the ACC's admitted failure to comply with its own constitution. As a result, the ACC lacked standing when it originally filed suit on December 21st, 2023, depriving this court of subject matter jurisdiction and rendering the ACC suit. It would crumble if Florida State didn't do anything the next day. Now, the part that I'm looking at here is, in no number of subsequent clandestine meetings to which no notice was provided to Florida State Board and apparently other conference members. To me, there's another part to this. To me, that means that Florida State knows for sure that they didn't have the votes, they didn't take the votes, and other schools are telling them that. There is a part to this motion. Let me see if I can find it. I should have highlighted it. Basically, it's saying this. Oh, here we go. Again, you can go read it. I do have a link in the description. Now I can't find it. Hold on, everybody. There's a part of this where Florida State basically is saying you didn't even have enough votes to give notice. And it looks like I cannot find it, which is too bad. My apologies. There is something in here. It's got to be at the beginning. You know, am I even on the right? Here we go. Well, I cannot find it. But basically, if somebody else can find it, they can show me where it is. But basically, Florida State basically says you didn't even have 2/3 votes to even notify that you were going to even have a vote on it. It's in there. I read it. I read it a few times. I should have highlighted it. Florida State, to me, to do this again on March 10th, or I'm sorry, on Friday, March 8th, to do this again, to me shows that they've had school, that they know because of other schools telling them there was no votes. There was no approval to have a motion internally to even have a vote on giving Jim Phillips the power, to have even a quorum. That is in that brief. They didn't even have enough votes, people coming together for a quorum. Now, Florida State is putting that in the brief, and later on the show, I'm going to find it. But they're putting that in there. They're putting that in there because who are the ones that could tell Florida State that? It ain't going to be Jim Phillips. Florida State won't know. Other schools are telling them. Clemson is saying nope. North Carolina, nope. Miami of Florida, nope. That's the only way that Florida State would absolutely know this. I got to find it in the brief. Vote on the vote. So anyways, I'm going to get to your comments. Talk about SMU. Talk about this Florida State filing another brief. Now we're 12 days away from March 22nd. Immaculate bylaws govern what conference can do. They have zero power that is not given them by those bylaws. To ignore the bylaws while raising suit against his member is ridiculous. And this is the second time Florida State, now I'm sure they're doing something different with this brief than they did the previous one, but this is the second time Florida State has brought this up. ACC did not have legitimate rights to file that suit on December 21st. One is because, first of all, Florida State needed to file. The suit on its own is nothing, and it only becomes something if Florida State files, which they did. But the bigger one is Jim Phillips did not have the authority to do this for the ACC. Okay, I'm going to open up the phone lines. So far in this show, we've talked about, well, we did a live show last night, which I think was very important. Tonight, we're setting the table. Jim Phillips, I think, is going to do all he can. And I think we're going to hear about it early this next week. Jim Phillips is going to do all he can not to have this distribution model become reality. That is being socialized. Where the Big Ten, $21 million for each school, SEC, $23 million, 13.7 for ACC, 12 and some for Big 12, about 1.8 million for G5. That differential between ACC schools and SEC Big Ten is only going to grease the skids, only going to cause more gasoline to put on the fire. It's only going to make it more. I give you an example. In Clemson, right? We've all been waiting on Clemson. Well, if you're part of the faction in Clemson that says, we got to pull the trigger, we got to go to our own South Carolina court. We got to use some of the same arguments that Florida State is. We're probably not going to get the same support from the governance of the state of South Carolina that Florida State has in the state of Florida, but we got to pull the trigger. Look at what just happened. Look at the differential that's going to happen here with playoff distribution money. That's going to give that faction at Clemson more ammunition to finally say, we've got to do it. Just one example. Jim Phillips, whatever he does this week, I think he's going to be full bore on trying to dismantle this socialized distribution model that might happen this week. Phone lines are open, 763-260-1333. Quite the conversations going on in the chat room. Holy smokes. I'm getting all caught up. Good evening, Hummus Hero. Good evening. Good evening, Doctor. There does seem to be quite the conversation going on. Holy.
Call from
Immaculate.
Mr. Hawkeye, the floor is yours. Man, oh man, I wish I could find this part. I'm going to go look while you talk, okay? There's a part in this briefing where Florida State really gets technical on the voting in the ACC. Go ahead. Floor's yours, sir.
Yeah, I got to keep my cooking here a little brief because I got to redo all this again later tonight. But, yeah, I've felt pretty strongly about this, and I've put out some pretty big posts on X about it a little while back. To me, this was the obvious play by them. I know Charles in chat, he's a lawyer, and he brought up a good point about how under certain circumstances they can go ahead without a vote to do this. But those, unless I'm mistaken here, and he can set me straight, but that tends to be when it's like a very serious situation is about to happen or something, and you needed to stop it immediately. The only situation that was about to happen was FSU was about to file in court. Like, yeah. That's it. Like, they weren't about to leave. They weren't about to walk out.
Yeah.
They were just filing in court, and NC wanted to get ahead of them, or they wanted to get ahead of them in the NC court, which, in my opinion, this doesn't have to happen this way, but these courts might take that as an insult. And you don't want to insult the judge. You know, we call him the court, but you don't want to insult the judge by kind of ensuing that they're going to just rule more in your favor, or even that this other court in Florida wouldn't give a fair ruling, because there's just decorum between the courts and between these folks. So I don't see there being enough reason for them to have gone against their bylaws.
Yeah, FSU didn't even officially withdraw from the conference. They just filed a suit to see if the Gore was valid. That's all.
Yeah, well, the only difference is where it's at, and so that becomes an entirely different statement. From what I've seen, the ACC did not have like a large, on-hand attorney numbers. Like this didn't have a whole lot of look at it. This was pretty much like one person who doesn't do a lot kind of made this decision, and I think that's going to bite them. I think they went ahead with this in a way that they shouldn't have. And now they have a strong attorney group with them. But, this is what lawyers have to do. Sometimes they have to argue a bad case. Even if they know they're probably going to lose, they still have to argue it. And Charles M. is in chat. And I really hope he calls in. I haven't heard from him for a while, but I think he would bring a good, unbiased lawyer perspective on this, because everything he's saying in chat right now I'm picking up on. But they just did not have reason to go this far. Yeah, there's reasons to do it at times. Was not that. They're in big trouble. I mean, at the least, what happens is the initial complaint gets thrown out, and the amended complaint gets then kind of taken on as the main complaint. But each one of those gets timed and dated. So everything that they're fighting for now, they're not going to be head of the line for courts anyways, because the amended complaint date will become the new date.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're behind anyways. And worse than that is the courts basically insulted that they went so far as to try to control where it's at in a way that's too obvious. We all know, like, okay, there's favoritisms and such like that, but not that much.
Yeah.
These courts aren't trying to ruin their names. I mean, this is a business court. Is a business court going to support this kind of behavior against the bylaws of an association? Like, that would be the bigger story.
Yeah.
Like this whole,
What do you think of? What do you think of my take on? It seems that Florida State, they must. I can't figure out any other way, but they must have a certain set of schools telling them that the ACC did not have this candle stymied. They weren't given notice to us at all about this. They must be getting some communication from the other schools in the ACC.
In regards to?
In regards to the ACC did not get enough votes to even have a quorum. I know it's in this briefing. I read it today, and for whatever reason, I cannot find it now. So
it's entirely possible that
they've had some communication.
The lines may not be so clear in terms of who's with who and who's working with who, and maybe someone who was there mentioned something to the FSU. I don't know. To me, I just tried to find a point to where that it just makes sense to kind of everyone, and to me that the whole fact that they went against their bylaws for that, and then later on with the amended complaint, they went and got the votes. And now you can't claim ignorance. You can't, there's nothing to claim. You knew the proper way to act and how to do it when you did it the second time. And the first time, your only defense for doing it is if there's some immediate threat to the association or whatever. And so you're saying the immediate threat to the association is that this case would be held in Florida. That's just a massive insult to a court. And while, we can all sit here on the outside and go, well, that might be warranted, the courts aren't going to defend that. They're not going to insult each other in that way. And to state that in a business court, to me, is just, you're asking them to basically say we're a kangaroo court.
Yeah.
It's not that much. You can't just be like, well, we're having a case in North Carolina, so it's a win. I mean, people thought the Washington State case, when it went to the Supreme Court in Washington, that they were going to, overturn it. They wouldn't even listen to it. So, this whole idea of courts showing that much favoritism, I don't think it exists to the degree that your average folks really think. It's a big deal to these folks that they not be seen as bought and paid for or biased. So I think best case, and Charles talked about it again here in chat, is the amended complaint becomes the original complaint.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he said something about maybe the date, they could take the date from the original one. I don't think so, considering the whole point of them doing it and breaking the bylaws was to get that date. you're as a court, you would be essentially approving of that behavior. So I don't see them giving that. Like, they'll say the amended complaint can go forward as the original complaint. Time and date stamped on that is what we go on. So I think the case goes on in North Carolina, but ACC loses whatever value that they thought they were going to have by filing first in North Carolina. That's just my thought. Not a lawyer, but this stuff is not really lawyer stuff. I mean, this is just like basic common knowledge stuff. And the lawyering is being, in my opinion, is being done on the ACC side, trying to argue, the whole idea that, after the fact, we can have this vote and that'll push it forward. That's lawyering. And that, I think that'd be fun to hear someone like Charles or someone talk about that. But to me, I don't think they have much of a leg to stand on.
I want to get back to this. I'm going to put up on the screen again. There's a reason that Florida State put it in, or the lawyers put it in here. It's right at the beginning of the brief. It says, "In no number of subsequent clandestine meetings to which no notice was provided to Florida State Board and apparently other conference members can undo or savage this threshold fatal flaw due to the ACC's admitted failure to comply with its own constitution." So, to me, what Florida State is saying is, you can have as many subsequent clandestine meetings you want. We don't know how many you had. Mm-hmm. But not only weren't we given notice, but apparently other conference members were not given notice.
Entirely possible. I mean, once you've got those public no votes from certain schools,
Clemson,
Carolina.
But the ACC is treating, if this is accurate, if this is accurate and truthful, that means the ACC is treating some other schools, probably Clemson, North Carolina. I can't believe they do this in North Carolina, but maybe Clemson. They're treating some other schools the same way they're treating Florida State, even though they haven't even done anything yet. Well, to which no notice was provided to Florida State Board, and apparently, like Florida State's been told this, other conference members. Woo! If that's the case, then just more fuel to the fire of whatever school Florida State's talking about, which is probably Clemson.
I would say Clemson, for sure. We've seen there was a video during the football season of either the Clemson AD or president that was on field with Phillips, and it did not look like a great conversation. And when you see them vote no to the expansion, and you see UNC vote no to the expansion, look, there's a lot more going on in talks between these folks. Like, they probably have a good idea who wants to go and who doesn't. And whoever they think wants to go, that's probably who they wouldn't bring in, because I would think that they would think that you're just going to go and tell Florida State whatever was talked about. I mean, clandestine, sneaky, questionable, ethical, whatever. That's probably what it's about. Is, all right, who else might be looking to leave, and who else is looking to benefit from Florida State knocking the door open? It's ugly, and some of that, though, I think that's within the bylaws, that they can form that quorum of 10 or 12, so they can technically do that. I can sit here and say that's ugly, nasty work, but they're empowered to do it. They're not empowered to not get a vote on filing suit against a member of the conference, period. So, unless, the existence of the conference is at stake, in that very moment, which it absolutely was not. So I don't know, man. I think it's about all on that. And an interesting piece put out also as well that was summarizing the entire Clemson story.
Yeah.
We might get something on that this week. Maybe not. Who knows at this point, right? who really wants to put your name on that?
Yeah.
But we'll see, man. I'm sure you got lots of folks here going, so I'll hop off here. But
You got it.
Yeah, I think we're going to see that initial complaint thrown out. So have yourself a good one, Greg.
Yeah.
Look forward to talking to you.
Appreciate it, Mr. Hawkeye. Thank you. Beautiful. Yeah, a lot of great comments there. I'm going to try to set this up a little bit differently. I had to take the phone off the hook for a moment. The phone line is now back on 763-260-1333, 763-260-1333. If you're just joining us, and we've got a lot of new people into the chat room, we've got a lot of things going on. Now, next week is could be the most vital week in college football modern day history, as the CFP are we going to have resolution? Are we going to have an implosion, an explosion, fireworks?
Call from
Ryan Thomas.
Ryan Thomas, the floor is yours. Set me straight. What's going on?
Greg, this reminds me back when I was a kid growing up in the 80s, and, my mom would watch the soap operas on TV. You had Dynasty and Dallas and things like this. And the ACC sort of reminds me of Dallas here. FSU is sort of like J.R. Ewing, the lovable villain.
Well, who shot J.R.?
Well, that's the good.
Who shot J.R.?
Who shot FSU? That's the good question.
Yeah.
But I mean, what's going on here is just, I wonder, the quorum that they had, because technically a quorum and a definition of quorum is basically over half the members, so to say. It may be more specific, but I mean, it could be possible, Greg, that, we have 15 members. It could be possible that the Magnificent Seven were all left out of this vote.
Well, okay, here's my problem. I know I read it in the brief. I did my work before we came on live, and now I can't find it. If somebody would go into the brief that was filed last night, I know Florida State went in particular when it came to quorum. They didn't even have a 2/3 vote. And it is like the most important thing out of this, and I cannot find it. So somebody please help me out. But go ahead, continue on, sir.
Yeah, I mean, an immaculate referenced the Dellinger article on Clemson getting ready to spring into its legal action. I'm really curious to see what happens here with Clemson, if there's someone willing to pick them up. Certainly on paper and in my head, I see just SEC all over this, but Greg Sankey's slow walking everything because he wants all the benefits but none of the responsibility of conference realignment. And, he doesn't want anything to change unless it benefits the SEC. So, I mean, I'm just really curious to see. I think FSU's on its way out. I mean, I think, even the ACC's argument is kind of ridiculous because, a court of law is still a court of law. And, I mean, as much as the home cook on that, Washington State got, at the end of the day, I mean, the bylaws with the bylaws of the Pac-12, and, they can't really find a fault in the reading of the judge's opinion on the bylaws. You can't really find any fault on that. And that's why the Washington Supreme Court didn't hear it. That's why they just kind of just said, this is fine, we're not going to pick it up. And, at the end of the day, even if the court's in Florida, the judge still has to follow standards. He or she still has, has to follow, professional code of ethics, So I mean, all the rules apply. So I mean, I think the ACC just, like I said, the comparison between the ACC and Pac-12 is the Pac-12 just didn't react. They didn't do anything. And the ACC just constantly seems to be overreacting or overreaching or just, taking steps out before figuring out where they're going, So, I mean, it's sort of a mess. But I guess the question I wanted to get to you, Greg, about is, where do you, with Clemson's legal challenge, where do you see them as far as having their possible, if this is getting close, that tells me they have a potential landing spot. Because I certainly know that if Clemson and FSU are said that they're out, I certainly know that right there and then that kills the ACC deal and pretty much springs the door open for everybody because ESPN's not renewing it after 2026. And, I mean, at that point, you could have a total free-for-all of people going different places and, it could be a total free-for-all. But I guess my question is what – and I know right now you have certain information on money purchases, purchase. You may or may not know any information, but I'm just curious, where do you think Clemson thinks it has a landing spot? How close is it to it? I mean, does Greg Sankey want to take it, or is the Big Ten possibly saying, hey, we'll just take Clemson and FSU because they're there? I mean, what are your thoughts on what you see happening? Because this does seem like it's getting pretty close to being sprung.
This is not a cop-out. I'm just being honest. There's still too many variables to all this. Okay?
Yeah.
I would at the PATC Sportsbook, which is down, you take a right on Keith Jackson Parkway and you find the Sportsbook. It's about a mile away from the Holy Smokes Theater. In that Sportsbook, it has Clemson and North Carolina as the favorite to go to the SEC.
Yeah.
We do know, well, we think we know. I mean, we were told for months that Clemson was working hard. They were doing all this stuff. And thank goodness Ross Dellinger put it in his article the other day. So people know that it was real. But Clemson has done all this work on it, and within that information that we were given, we were also told during the time that Clemson had positive feedback. Exactly what that positive feedback, who it came from, I think it's like third-party media partner type of talk. I don't think it came from the conferences. So
yeah.
Other than that, I can't, there's other stuff I can't expound on, but this whole time, guys, the whole Clemson thing was as real as the Colorado thing, but it did not happen.
Oh, yeah.
And we took the L on it. I don't know why I don't know if it's because they're holding hands with North Carolina. I don't know.
Yeah, that seems to be my feel, is that North Carolina and Clemson are sort of working together, and I think you mentioned that before.
Can I interrupt you, Ryan?
Yeah, please.
And I apologize. Do you still have some time?
Sure. I mean,
okay.
I'm game for anything.
Okay. I want to read this part because now I did not find the one part I'm really looking for, but I did find another part that when I was prepping for the show. I don't know what's going on with me, but anyways, I want to show this before I lose it, Ryan. Okay.
Go ahead, please.
Okay.
Please.
So here's near the end of the brief, ladies and gentlemen in the chat. If anybody's still with me, the ACC. It hid from the court, and I'm reading the brief, and some of its own members, the January 12th, 2024 vote to approve the ACC's apparently now material First Amendment complaint. Now just bear with me here. So this is an I apologize to Immaculate. I apologize to everybody in the chat because I don't know what's going on. I'm losing this stuff. Thank God I found this one. So this is the first amended complaint. Remember, we had the first file on December 21st. This is the first amended complaint. The ACC hid from the court and some of its own members the January 12th, 2024 vote to approve the ACC's apparently now material First Amendment complaint. Indeed, the ACC wrote to Florida State's General Counsel on January 12th, 2024 and failed to make any mention of the member meeting scheduled for the same day. This clandestine meeting is also referenced nowhere in the ACC's First Amendment complaint because the ACC, for obvious reason, hid its backroom machinations until it had no other choice but to address the Florida State's board challenge as to the standing. Hold on a second here.
Okay.
Somewhere in this, but it's not just Florida State that they're hiding this from. It's other members of the ACC. Go ahead. Floor is yours.
No, and that's the thing, is when you're hiding it from other members, that naturally the consequence or the response to that is that's going to sow distrust within the conference, and those other members are going to work even harder to find a way to get out. That's just not a conducive environment. I mean, when you have a situation, that's just, again, although it's not a one-to-one scenario, it's sort of like, in general, it's sort of like Kliakoff just doubled down on the bad stuff that Larry Scott did, or just continued the mistakes, and it seems like Jim Phillips is doing the same thing here after, after Swafford's gone. I know the situations are not the same at all, but it just seems like, they're not learning any lessons, and they're just, doubling down on doing things to hurt themselves. Yeah. And it's unbelievable to me because ultimately, I think in Dellinger's article, the goal is at a minimum is to see if they can get ESPN to come back to the table and offer more money, maybe to keep them happy. But, ESPN, like I said last night, they're always going to do as much as they can get away with. But, ultimately, it's like I mentioned 3 or 4 months ago, I think we're headed for total implosion here with the ACC, because I just don't know how you can have this environment where you're basically have groups of members doing things behind, and I'm talking both about those trying to get out, but also those trying to, do various things to keep everyone in or keep it together. When you have people doing things behind each other's back and there's no trust, I just don't see how that, I don't see how that possibly keeps that conference together. I could be wrong, but.
And just to finish this call up, sir, there does, at least from Florida State's perception, there does seem to be, and it says members, not members. So from Florida State's perception, there are other schools that are being treated the same way Florida State's being treated, even though they haven't gone to the courts. But I thank you for your call, sir.
No problem, Greg. Great job with the show. Keep up the good work, my friend.
Appreciate it.
One last thing.
Yeah.
Charles, please call in Mr. Charles in. We'd love to hear your insight. Charles is an SMU fan, I think. But, Charles, we'd love to get your insight. So please call in, my friend. Make the time to do it. We'd love to have you on the show. Be a legend. Don't be afraid.
Got it. Beautiful. Thank you, sir. Carrie, I do apologize. I have not got to this earlier. I'm so deep into this briefing in which, for some reason, I keep losing what I want to talk about. But Carrie, thank you so much for the 5 gifted memberships. Holy smokes. Carrie, you are once again hereby knighted Cloak and Dagger. once again, thank you for your incredible generosity to this channel. This is not the first time. You have done this multiple times. Thank you, Carrie. And for those who receive these gifted membership, holy smoke, Cloak and Dagger membership, where you can watch membership-only videos, please thank Carrie in the chat room. And all of you that got the gift, you are hereby Cloak and Dagger knighted. Donnie, thank you so much, Carrie. I do appreciate it. And Corey, you did it earlier in the show. Donnie, thank you so much for the membership, gifted membership you've given into the chat. Mr. Buckeye, thank you. Donnie McNerney, thank you for your generosity once again. You are hereby knighted Cloak and Dagger. Thank you so very much. Expedition Greg, thank you for your gift membership given out to the PATC community. Everybody looks like in the chat's becoming a member of PATC. Thank you, Expedition Greg, for your incredible generosity. The PATC community, I lean on them more than anybody else does. They're a whole lot smarter than me. They're so very generous. Thank you so very much.
Call from
Dan Miter.
Dan Miter, thanks for calling in, sir. The floor is yours.
How are you tonight, Greg?
I'm doing good. I'm screwing up a lot on this show. I'm screwing up a lot. I'm losing things that I want to talk about. I don't know what's going on with me. But go ahead. Maybe you can save the show.
Well, I was working on my trailer today for a couple hours, and this is regarding your show yesterday about this conference meetings this week about all this money juggling and things. And, you know, it's heading this way anyway. The players are going to get paid. Don't you agree?
Yes.
My idea was, why not have the Power Four? Because everybody's got a lot of money invested in facilities and athletes, whatever. These Power Four basically right now. But now the G5 can do the same thing, but they form a conference. I mean, everybody in the conferences now. That ends the conference expansion and eliminates, all these other G5 schools in. I mean, they can expand down the road, but just in football at the moment, why not form basically a North and South division? So, and I guess the Southern Division would be the SEC, the ACC, kind of an L shape. You start in Texas, go to the right, go all the way down to Florida. That means Florida State, but there would be no conferences. It'd be just divisions, okay? Everybody gets paid the same. You have salary caps on the teams, okay? So if a team needs a good quarterback, you got to pay $2 million. You might have to sacrifice a different position. Okay, now the Northern Division would start on like where Penn State is basically or whatever, and it would be all the way to, across the plains to the West Coast and down. So you'd have a square shape. You follow me?
Yeah.
So you're going to have 72 teams basically. You split them up, 3 to 4 divisions. Let's just say 4. That comes out 9 teams per, you'd have a CFP North, a CFP South, CFP East, that'd be the north part, the South be a South CFP, East, West, North, South of that division. You play them games, that's 9 games, or 8 games, whatever. Still gives you a chance, just like the NFL is a perfect model. Why not follow it? You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Even the walk-ons could come into play here. They wouldn't get money, but they would be, I guess kind of like the old cowboy saying, they get books, bunk, and bed, you know what I mean, type thing. Yeah. And same way as red shirts, but each team would have to report every week what they're doing, you know what I mean? And, if there's any violations, it would be like a year suspension of the CFP. Second violation would be 3 years, you know what I mean? Whatever, the penalty has to be severe enough that they can't do this because somebody's going to try it, you know what I mean? And I'm just wondering if something like that, and then in this case, Notre Dame is going to have to make up their mind whether they want to play football or not, because they're going to have to jump in either the North Division, basically. You know what I mean?
What team are you a fan of?
I am a Cyclone.
A Cyclone, Iowa State. Correct.
And I know we'd be in the same division as Minnesota. So, but you know what? In Minnesota would have the same cap as Georgia. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You see what I'm?
That's for a college football fan, that sounds great, right?
Yes.
But the only chance that really could have ever happened was probably in the early 1980s, right after the Oklahoma case versus why would a Mississippi State want that to happen? Why would SEC schools want this? What would they be getting out of this? Just for example, what would happen with the SEC network? What would happen with the Big Ten network?
Well, you would have everybody would be involved in this. I mean, all the media. You would have ESPN, Fox, CBS, NBC. What do I want to say? The streaming. Everybody could be involved in all of this. Even True TV just announced they're dropping their biggest show and going to sports and stuff. And I think that's a great opportunity for the Big 12 right now. By the way, but because they don't have a network like everybody else, but. I think these teams, they're just not, I'm saying, the top teams in the SEC, but when's the last time Mississippi State, Texas A&M have been relevant? You know what I mean? They're getting beat by Georgia and Alabama for stuff too. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but why? My question is would they be making more, the same, or less money than they do now if this happened, if this scenario happened?
I think they would be making more because the media partners would know exactly what they're going to get. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They know that, you know what I mean? And everybody could bid on whatever. I just want to follow, NFL's got a good model of this, and I don't know why they're not following it. You know what I mean? If you're going to have to pay athletes, why not make it similar to the NFL? You know what I mean? And I guess the NIL, I don't quite have it figured out how that's going to work, if at all, really. You know what I mean? Because if they're getting paid, why do they need to have the NIL? You know what I mean? I don't know how that works, but
I don't think the schools that are making more money now are going to want to lose their advantage, right? To be blunt, they're not going to want to lose their advantage. The media companies didn't even want to pay for the Pac-12 conference. So now are they going to have all these teams in this this huge united college football league, and everybody gets paid the same, and everybody gets paid more? The media companies are not interested in that. Okay. Else they would have paid the Pac-12 just as much as these other conferences.
I see. I was just trying to make this fair to everybody.
Sure.
The teams that are never going to be relevant, you know what I mean, how to get an equal playing field, even in the, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's never been an equal playing field. And I think there was an opportunity of that happening. Maybe I'm being naive, but I think in the early 80s there was an opportunity for that to happen, but it did not happen. It went the other way.
Right.
But there's always been a disparity. I mean, even within the conferences. And I just don't think that's going away. And unfortunately, the gap is going to grow. The one part, though, is that this whole exclusive rights for a first-round bye in the playoffs, that's just a bridge too far. I mean, that's just unbelievably stupid, in my opinion. The money gap is going to grow. Hey, the money, even if everybody got paid the same media money, Georgia's going to make a whole lot more than Minnesota and Iowa State. right? Ticket
Right.
sales, sponsorships. But I get what you're saying. I just think that horse left the barn in the early 80s, unfortunately.
I this came to me in a couple hours thinking they got 2.5 years to do this, but
Yeah.
I guess when you get greedy, the minds ain't going to come together. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And at this point, it's already, the SEC, I guess 25 years ago wasn't even that relevant to, dominate. Now that they are, I don't want to see them control the next 100 years. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, these big, large conferences, they could fracture, right? They could fracture.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Right,
I just put it out there, just food for thought.
Beautiful.
Just come to my head. And after that deal yesterday, your deal, I thought that was a great show and probably one of your best, if I have to admit. I really liked it. So, okay, well, I'll let you go and get to some other callers and some of your other chats. I just had to put that out there.
Sir.
Thank you. Bye.
You. All right, the phone lines are open, 763-260-1333. Thanks for everybody coming on in. If you're new to the channel, if you haven't done so, please hit the subscribe button. Get your notifications on because we're going to be coming on live a lot next week. And smash that like button if you like our content.
Call from
Charles Malloy.
Charles is on the line. Holy smokes. Mr. Mustang, the floor is yours.
Well, I pretty much said everything I had to say so far in my comments, written comments, but you guys asked me to call in, so I did.
Beautiful.
This is not clear cut on either side. I don't think there's good arguments on both sides. It's going to be, as I said in the comments, kind of like the Bush versus Gore of 2000 election litigation. Mm-hmm. You heard those lawyers argue before the Florida Supreme Court and the U.S. Supreme Court, and, you could go with either side with their arguments. They were quality arguments. And I think we kind of got that in this case, and we've got parties that are fairly equally matched. There can be bias with the courts in favor of the more powerful parties. That's a fact of life. But here they're quasi equally matched. Maybe not in Florida because you got a Florida state, a state institution in a Florida court. So there may be some natural bias there. Governments do have advantages in their own courts. But I don't, if North Carolina wants out too, and maybe North Carolina State, what about North Carolina law is an advantage to the ACC? Is there a psychological advantage or bias advantage in North Carolina, or is there an advantage under the law as written? I haven't heard anybody articulate why they think they want to stay in North Carolina versus Florida. I mean, is there any advantage to one over the other from a legal standpoint on the substantive law? Now, Immaculate made some really good comebacks to my comments, and they're equally valid concepts or principles. There is the relation back doctrine. The admitted pleading would relate back, but there's limitations on that. And certainly, if the first pleading was fraudulent in that you didn't have authority, it was ultra virus is the Latin term. It was not an authorized act. They didn't have authority to file that lawsuit. Certainly as a sanction, they could toss it out and ignore it, so you don't get to relate back. There's many reasons not to relate it back, but it's theoretically possible that it could relate back in time. And there's also a doctrine of ratification. If they could get the votes to approve the lawsuit after the fact, and it was just an emergency situation, they perceived a huge procedural and psychological disadvantage to being in court in Florida. Filing in North Carolina may be in order to obtain an unbiased forum, of course, or biased in their favor, actually. That may be a good reason. It could also arguably not be a good reason. It could be improper forum shopping. So these two different doctrines conflict with each other, and the courts are going to have to decide which doctrine takes precedence over the other. These are hard decisions for the courts to make because it'll affect not only this particular case, but a lot of other cases in the future when they pick one doctrine prevailing over another.
Yeah.
And
so heading into March 22nd, Florida State is asking for this to be dismissed or stayed. Can you explain the difference? What is the few scenarios that could happen coming out of March 22nd? Or is this a case, no matter what happens, the judge is going to say, I'll come back to you in a couple of weeks, whatever?
Well, a stay, I've encountered something similar in family law court where you've got parents that are in one jurisdiction or take the children from one jurisdiction to another, and you're arguing over which court. I had one, Texas versus California, and neither court wanted to exercise jurisdiction.
Oh.
And it was like a ping pong ball going back and forth, and ultimately California won by default because Texas said they didn't want it last. So you can stay at pending action by another court to determine whether they have jurisdiction or not under their law. Or it's still, if you're staying, it's still out there, it's still filed, and it can be revived at any point on motion of any party or upon the court acting on its own accord. They call that sua sponte. But if there's grounds to just put a halt to this and wait and see what happens, I don't know what they'll tie it to. It could be anything, but in this instance, it's probably going to see what the Florida court's going to do and what the parties do. They could settle in the interim, or it could. I'm just surprised it's not already in federal court.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You want to expound on that, or?
Well, maybe they don't want. Maybe nobody wants it in federal court.
Oh.
So there's. I'm just surprised that if Florida State loses on the motion to stay or dismiss, that you may see that. Well, they've already passed the time to remove it. They had 30 days from when it was filed and they were served. So maybe they just ran out the clock and it's not going to be removed. But I really, unless somebody can point out, I'm not a North Carolina lawyer. I'm a Texas lawyer.
Yeah.
So there might be something in North Carolina law that it works to the ACC's advantage, the corporate ACC corporate. But I'm not aware of anything.
You brought up the scenario of Florida State possibly losing on the dismissal. What are the, and I'm not going to hold you to any of this. I'm just a stupid guy asking stupid questions, Charles. But what are the chances we find that out that they lost?
Oh, heck, the court can hear the arguments and take it under advisement and sit on it for forever.
They could sit on forever, or they could give a ruling that day?
Either way, yeah.
Okay.
I've seen both happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I certainly would maybe want more briefing. I might want to hear from ESPN's lawyers if they've intervened in the matter. I may want to hear from other interested parties, friends of the court, the state governments, the attorneys generals, that give them opportunity to state their case. Some of these issues are that important that they get it right and not act rashly. But and it could go either way. There are good arguments going both ways, and only in this instance, only one party can win in the end.
And the proceedings on March 22nd, I'm assuming it's going to be, it's not going to be like an hour, correct? It's going to be a while. The proceedings, right?
It depends on how well organized the argument is, and whether the court wants to limit argument. If I'm the judge, I'll let everybody take as long as they want and need to. I mean, you can overspeak and kill your case by talking too much, but it's important to cover all bases. And I don't believe in artificially limiting people's access to justice and arguments, but a lot of judges do, and they'll just flat limit them time-wise. I know, and without knowing what the court's announced, they may have standing orders that give you a set amount of time if they stick and adhere to strictly. A lot of courts do that these days, but it's typically in your more standard type litigation. This is non-standard litigation.
Yeah.
And because it's non-standard, they're probably going to be more liberal in terms of time constraints on argument.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, I thank you, Charles. I thank you for the phone call. Please call again. I'm going to need you, sir.
All right, man. I'm out here. I try to stay. Okay, Greg.
Appreciate it, sir. Great call.
All right, man. Bye-bye.
Holy smokes, Charles, a great resource for the PATC community. Man, I hope he calls again. Beautiful. Terry Kane, Super Chat, thank you so much for your incredible generosity, Mr. Kane. Eating my popcorn, watching the chaos in the chat, watching the chaos everywhere, Terry. Thank you so much for your Super Chat. I appreciate you coming on in to the PATC community today. Mr. Kane, Mr. Hurricane, holy smokes. Holy smokes. Thank you for the generosity. Ryan Thomas, we need a PATC law office by the theater. Well, okay, fine, but it can't be right next to the theater. I'm going to get back to this in a second.
Call from
JD.
JD, can you hold on a second here?
Yes, sir.
We're talking very serious business. We need, first of all, the PATC law office cannot be near the theater. The theater has a large, not too much of, it only has 40 rows to the theater, but it has a decent sized parking lot. We don't want it next to the sports book. We're going to scare people away from the sports book, which you take a ride on Keith Jackson Parkway. But for now, besides the location, we need a name. We need a name for the PATC law office. We also need a name for the whole city that we're building here in PATC. So we need people in the chat room, PATC community, to get your thinking caps on, to get your creativity up. We need names for the law office, and we need a name for the whole city that we're building. JD, Ryan Thomas, thank you for your super chat. JD, thank you for your patience. FSU, we talked about it, JD. Is Florida State going to file another brief before March 22nd? They did so. Have you been talking to anybody? What is your perception on what Florida State just did? They're arguing that ACC did not have the ability, the rights, the authority, the legitimacy to file a suit a day before Florida State did, and it's just all unconstitutional according to the bylaws. JD, the floor is yours.
I'm glad I followed Mr. Charles because he said things so much more eloquently than I could.
Yeah.
You have the FSU lawyers, Doug Rohan and Danielle Kelly, and they do a great job. They'll acknowledge they have a FSU bias. In some of the message boards and other chats, off of here, FSU lawyers, they aren't all in agreement. And a lot of them fall in line with what Mr. Charles was saying. There's arguments back and forth whether or not the January 12th vote will be recognized by the court. You just don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I personally side with FSU's argument, and that they jumped the gun. And there's other lawyers that say it's just as clear as can be, but you just don't know what the court's going to say. And I'm definitely not a lawyer. I have a personal opinion that I think the North Carolina judge is going to stay the action. That's just me personally.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when he referenced Bush versus Gore, I think in the ACC's original response, they referenced the FSU lawyer that goes by All Knowles, on War Chant. He was actually one of the attorneys in the Bush versus Gore, dispute decades ago. Anyway, he laid out it was about a week ago. I think he's going to be at the Leon County hearing. It's scheduled for 90 minutes. So he laid out all the different topics that will be discussed in kind of in the order of importance, and he acknowledged that a lot of them, there's just not enough time for them all to be heard. So the way I reference that is he was saying that it's common and customary. Well, it's customary. The judge is going to read ahead. They're presenting the arguments ahead. That's part of what this most recent action was. Granted, there's going to be oral arguments in North Carolina. They're sending all this to the judge, to the court. They're going to read ahead. It's not like it's, they're presenting it. Yes, they're going to present oral arguments in court, but obviously the judge is going to know what they're discussing. So the judge is already going to have a lot of preconception. The way I understand it, it's already going to be well-versed on the arguments and everything moving forward. So sometimes it might move pretty quickly. And I don't know how it is in North Carolina. They may give them 6 hours for all I know. Yeah. But from what I understand, in Leon County, they're going to have 90 minutes. And it could be that they extend the hearing to another
in Leon County?
That's what I was under the impression of. It was 90 minutes. So, what does that mean? What, how much are they presenting to the court, which I think they're presenting most everything they have up to this point to the court. So the court and what do you call it? They're the judges, clerks, and so on. I mean, they're going ahead, and they're going to be very well prepared for the whole action. But anyway, so I just thought I'd throw that in there. I'm glad to see this is happening. I won't be surprised if there's more. Maybe there won't be. I don't know, but I think I was finding some of the things that you were referencing. I think in the first couple of pages of the introduction.
Yeah, Dave Bauer. I'm just going to interrupt you for a second, JD. If that's
no, you go
okay.
ahead. You go ahead.
Dave Bauer, PATC community, saved me. He sent me the part. I don't know. Maybe I had a stroke early on today. I'm not sure what's wrong with me. But he did send me the part that I read over and over again, but I couldn't find. So I'm just going to read it real quick, JD. It's up on the screen. It's up on the screen. It's number 1, for God's sakes. What is wrong with me? Anyways, Dave Bauer saved me. Thank you, Mr. Bauer. I appreciate it. The ACC admits that it did not comply with its own constitution. The ACC has now definitely confirmed that it did not provide notice of a meeting and then conduct such a meeting with a quorum. According to the Florida State, according to the brief, why didn't I get this early? Why couldn't I find this? The ACC has definitely confirmed that it did not provide a notice of a meeting and then conduct such a meeting with a quorum as required by 1.5.3.3 of the ACC Constitution, nor did it secure the requisite approval of an absolute 2/3 of the ACC member directors as required by 1.6.2 before prematurely initiating material litigation on the evening of December 21st, 2023. They didn't even have, Florida State is saying this, JD, they didn't even have the 2/3 of the ACC members directors before initiating material litigation on the evening of December 21st, 2023. Now look, that means, to me, JD, that means Florida State has been in communication with a certain faction of the ACC. You might want to call them the Magnificent Seven. You can call them whatever you want, but they know that the ACC did not get the 2/3 of the ACC members directors to require. Now, maybe the argument is that, Jim Phillips did not need all this to happen, that this was an emergency thing. This was something that he had the authority to do. But remember, when they did this on December 21st, Florida State had done nothing. They hadn't filed a suit. They still haven't filed a notice of withdrawal. They were just... So anyways, JD, you can take it from there. But this is the part that I was missing early in my show. Thank you, Mr. Dave Bauer, for saving me. Go ahead, JD.
No, I mean, you're touching on one of the things that I was going to bring to your attention, and I'm glad somebody sent it to you, because those are some of the aspects that are the most glaring to me. Is that I believe I caught most of what Immaculate was saying earlier. I was doing some stuff at the time when you started the show, but
can we agree on this, JD? JD, can you, Mr. Seminole and the fat guy from Minnesota, can we agree on the following? There are ACC schools talking out of school to Florida State, right?
Oh, I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
I absolutely believe that. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I think I won't be surprised if North Carolina is like a double agent, So, because they I don't have a lot of sympathy for North Carolina, but I understand there's a lot of responsibility on their shoulders. They will be the straw that will be the straw that break the camel's back on that. I mean, that will be, because that's the heart and soul of the conference right there is UNC. And but Clemson, Clemson's looking out for Clemson. They're all looking out for each other. But I won't be shocked that if there's schools that voted for the action that'll still communicate with FSU. Because I don't. We don't know the dynamic. We don't know the political dynamic right now in the ACC. We don't know the threats. We don't know any of that. It seems like they're a pretty passive group, except when they're trying to lock down their members.
Yeah.
But there could be some that voted for the action on January 12th, but also behind the scenes, they're also saying, "Hey, FSU, we had to do it because we didn't want to bring enough we didn't have bring too much attention to ourselves."
Yeah.
But hey, here, this is what's being done. I don't know. I don't know. I'm sure, like anything else, wouldn't be shocked if there's people in the ACC headquarters that are sympathetic to FSU. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe they want to deal with the Big Ten. I mean. I don't know that I'd go that far, but you understand what I'm saying. There's ways to get the information, and so yes, sir. But yeah, I didn't have a whole lot of fandom. I was gonna come in and chime in today. We're getting to some of the more serious aspects of the case moving forward, and hopefully we get to the point where I'm hoping that something significant happens in FSU's favor just to get the ACC to go ahead and settle. But who knows? Who knows how long this is going to go? But like you and I, like I've said to you before, all FSU has to do is win one thing, just win one thing. And there's so many different points in this whole case. Just win one. And even if they lose, the way that I understand the language, they're both, even the ACC has more or less legally stated that they're willing to do a settlement, So at some point when this is done, we're going to have a number, okay? So that's what all this is about. This isn't about salvaging the relationship between FSU and the ACC. We're past that point. Anybody who says that FSU is going to stay in the ACC, I don't think they're reading the room properly. It's just now we are strictly trying to get to a number, and that's it. And I think that's where we are. But anyway, thank you for your time, sir. I always enjoy your show.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Have a great night.
All right. If you haven't done so, please subscribe to our channel. Get your notifications on. Smash the like button if you liked our content. If you don't like our content, hit the thumbs down button. Let me know how we can better serve you, the college football fan. But please have your notifications on because this is going to be an unbelievable week. Josh Pate, I probably lost it now. He's advertising the show tonight. I mean, look at this. Late kick live alert. CFB's big week arrives. This is a big week. There is a method to the madness here at Peek Around the Corner. We did a live show yesterday on Saturday. We did a live show today because we wanted to set the table. We think we did that with a really good show last night. And then today with FSU swatting back the ACC, and which I think is big, great arguments. But even more, I got a feeling that there are ACC schools that are, what do you guys call it nowadays, this generation? They're giving the Florida State the T, giving them T. How do you say that? T? I don't know. Cloak and dagger, cloak and dagger, cloak and dagger. That's how we say it at PATC. There's some cloak and dagger stuff going on. Jim Phillips, who do you trust? I don't know how many people you can trust in the ACC. And then we have this big week coming on where I think Jim Phillips is going to fight back on this distribution model. He has to. What made SMU, the ingredients that gave SMU the ability to grease the skids for them to jump over the wall are the same ingredients, is the same energy, the same fuel, the same big old fire that makes Florida State want to jump, North Carolina, Clemson, and if you missed that part early in the show, we explained all of that. I want to thank everybody that's come on in. I know there's going to be a live show coming up in a few minutes on Big 12 Mafia, so catch that. I hope Jen Knoll is on that show. I would love to hear what she has to say about this brief. But go check out that show at Big 12 Mafia. We're going to be closing up the live show right now. I want to thank everybody who has come on in with the incredible generosity, the unbelievable comments in the chat room. Things were going on. I couldn't even get Jen. I apologize. Hopefully you have time, Jen, to get on the show with the immaculate Nathan Brown. If you do, I'm going to be watching, and I'll probably have questions for you, Jen. So elbow those guys, get on that show. When you're on that show, you're the best part of that show, without a doubt. So I apologize for that. Look, we talked about it early in this live show. The roast that Mireya made, it sounds like in the chat she says it's real spicy. Yes, I do like cheese. Of course. But it's got to be separate from the meat. It's got to be separate from the meat. Anyways, we'll talk about that later. Big week. Epic week coming up. I'm telling you. Keep your head on a swivel, number 1. Brace for impact, number 2. Buckle up, number 3. And stay close to us here at Peek Around the Corner, because we are in one heck of a ride. Subscribe, get yourself notified, smash the like button. Until next time, which could be at 9 o'clock tonight. If there's more breaking news, it could be at 6 o'clock in the morning. It could be at any time. Until next time, from all of us at PATC, to all of you, please, you all take great care of each other.